I'll try in the box and try something else, something with saturation. Maybe a compressor will do the trick. It's just song to song, and whatever it needs, as I said, to get to the final stage, which is the mastered product.
Yeah, love it. Yes, I guess the bloom or whatever it is, once you're going out of the box, it's like doing some sort of compression, even if you're not using a compressor, right?
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, kind of like an amplifier, like a guitar amp or something.
Yeah, you can call it like distortion, even, right? I mean, it's not like total harmonic distortion, like they say, like all this mastering gear has such a low total harmonic distortion. But in my mind, distortion is just changing the original signal. And so, as soon as you go out of the digital world, and you translate those zeros and ones, you translate to a fully analog signal. That's going to interact with your gear. It's going to interact with the tubes. It's going to interact with the transformers, with the inductors. And it just adds this warmth, this saturation. The Verimue has this amazing drive and saturation you get on the input channel. If you just kind of input a dB or two on it and bring back the output, it really opens up the high end. It saturates the width in just such a really, really lovely way. And that's not for every song.
Love it. So you were kind of talking about this earlier, how you kind of, the first time you're listening to the song, you're kind of like writing down notes.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that moment. Do you listen to the entire song top to bottom before you touch any pieces of gear?
Typically, yes. Typically, I'll give it a full listen because you don't know where you're going unless you know where the song goes. And so, some people focus on like the chorus, but I feel like that's for later in the mastering stage. I think what you need to do is get your bearings. Some songs have a really loud chorus, but then the outro will be this crazy loud part where if you don't know it's coming, your settings are going to be way off. So you need to know what you're dealing with first. Once that happens, I'll focus on the chorus, the loudest part, and I'll start, tweaking some things, dialing in some settings, seeing what happens, and you go back, listen to different parts of the song, and then once I get close, listen to the song as a whole, and it's constantly assessing where you are.
Yeah. How organized do you keep yourself? Like, are you constantly writing down little notes, like on a piece of paper, or is it like mental?
It's all mental. So I'll write down notes when I first listen, like my first impressions. That's what I really, really want to write down because that's what you can't get back.
Right.
The rest of it is like, if I'm writing notes, it's going to be me like chasing my own tail constantly. Right. Like you can get so turned around in a mastering studio if you're not going on, I think it's like impulse. You really have to be confident in what you're hearing and what you're doing, because the second you start kind of second guessing, that's the second you can start convincing yourself that things aren't how you've been hearing it and it actually sounds differently. So I try to get that first impression. What does this need for my very first listen? What can I hear? Is that snare too loud? Does that need to be tamed? Do the vocals need a boost? What frequency range could that be in? And those are really just like a guiding. It's trying to guide me. It might not be hard and set what I do, but it just helps me guide myself towards the end.
Yeah, I love what you said there about like just like the impulse, and it seems like the more people I interview, the more I read about it, the more like. Even I think this applies to mixing as well as mastering. It's like you have to work fast, and then you got to give yourself some space to be objective.
Yes.
Like I find with even with mixing for me, like the most important part of the mix is like the first 2 hours of creative actual mixing I can do, especially if I do it in the morning.
Yeah.
And so if I do like 2 hours of like just hardcore, really fast mixing, and then I take it away from, then I stop.
Yep.
And like I give it a day, and then I'll listen back. Like. That's usually like the 80% that I need to put into the mix, and the rest of that is just fine tuning and tweaking and whatever.
Exactly. I feel like it's a very, very similar thing for how I work, and I love that you said to give yourself some perspective and give yourself a time limit. And one of the things that I know that some of the bigger mastering engineers will do is they say, I give myself 60 minutes, or maybe it's 90 minutes. But once you've worked on a song, on a master for more than 60 minutes or 90 minutes, whatever you've decided however long you've decided good to work on a song for. Past that, you're just chasing your own tail, and nothing is actually going to get any better. So you need to move quickly. Right. You need to move confidently. And at the end, if you reach a point where you're like, I don't know, you're throwing your hands up in the air, give yourself a 10-minute break. I will go for a walk 5 times a day just around the block, just because I'm like, okay, I'm way too close to this. I need some perspective. I put my phone down. I don't take anything with me, and I'll just go out for a 10 or 20-minute walk and come back, and you'll hear things so much more clearly.
Yeah. The brain can only process so much.
Yeah.
And time is the best way to be objective, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Nice. So do you have any creative or favorite tools in the studio? I guess you mentioned the Massive Passive and the Vari-Mu.
Yeah, those are my 2 favorites. And I mean, I have a whole bunch of tools in the box. I love DMG's stuff. Limitless, Equilibrium, and Essence are probably on every master I do. Unbelievable EQs, unbelievable limiter. The limiter is great. It actually has 2 limiters and a clipper all in one. But it's the limiter that, like, in the box that Bobcat swears by. It's what it does is it combines a transient limiter and a dynamic limiter into one with a clipping process in between. So it's really all the limiting and clipping that you would want.
What's the difference between a transient limiter and a dynamic limiter?
So the transient is really just trying to catch like a peak limiter. Whereas a transient limiter will typically have a slower attack and release, or at the very least a slower release, and is really doing more broad strokes, I would say. And that's, I don't know if you've heard of limiter stacking. That's a common technique in mastering, is using
I've heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. He's using multiple limiters. And they don't all do the same thing. Some of them will catch the peaks. Some of them are more geared towards just general dynamics, overall dynamics. And obviously you're not limiting for much using these. It's very, very small amounts.
Right. It's a matter of like limiting the actual body of the track, or just the limits, like just those little transients that pop up so that you can bring it up to a higher level.
Yes.
Kind of
yeah, exactly. And here's a good example. Let's say you have a really, really loud snare. The transient limiter will catch that, but the dynamic limiter will let that go more, and it catches more like when the whole song increases in volume. Like if the chorus is louder, the dynamics limiter is going to catch more of that, whereas the peak limiter is still going to catch all the snare hits in the verse.
Right. I guess I've always thought of limiting as the transient limiter more than I've thought of it as a dynamic limiter.
Yes.
That's cool.
So many ways to use limiters.
Right. That's said from the mastering engineer. to your ears.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Wizardry, right?
Yeah, love it. So I think, Kristian, let's move on to the sauce segment, which I've recently named The Sauce.
I love it.
It's Secret Sonics because I was going for the secret sauce.
Yeah.
And I don't even know. Maybe it could be that somebody gave me the name The Sauce, and I'm not sure if someone told it to me or if it was me. So if you deserve credit, let me know for the name The Sauce. So you actually wanted to go into 2 songs because they each had like very different stories and different processes. So let's start with the first one, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll move on to the second one. So the first song you sent me is called Stereotypes by an artist named Huni, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
I believe it's Honey, I think.
Honey.
Yeah.
Okay.
With H-U-N-N-I. Oh, right.
The Israeli in me is pronouncing it like hummus, or I don't know. I'm not sure.
Awesome.
So Stereotypes by Honey, and we're going to listen to about 90 seconds of it in real time, and then we'll talk about it.
Great.
So hold the phone.
Here we are. It's a big old sign telling you to be wise. Picking left, picking right. On the system, stereo, riding your life. On the system, archaic stereotypes. Who are you now? Who were you then? Whoever you are, we could be more than friends if you're into it. If you're into it. Fuck stereotypes. If you're into it. Rewriting the top line lane. Siding with the modern base. I could be to go. You don't need context, no. This is not a project, no. Said I got you, babe. I need you, babe. Just do you, babe. This is not a project, no. Yeah, you are not a contest. Rewriting the top line lane.
All right, man. Super dope. Punchy. It's like, it sounds like compressed, but also has space, and I don't know. Yeah, it just sounds great.
Yeah, and that one was a really, really great mix. That actually, I think I did that one on Monday, I did that Friday, because Monday would have been yesterday.
Oh, this past Friday.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and
you guys work fast, mastering engineers.
Yeah, exactly. People are always shocked. They're like, "What's your turnaround time?" Like, probably a week. It's like, oh my God. But anyway, back to the track, Stereotypes by Honey. It came out of the studio Division 88, who I do some work with. And they're kind of like a recording studio / label / coalition of artists. And yeah, it was just a really, really cool track. As you hear it, it's got that really nice, poppy, bright vocal. Those really cool horns that come in the back, and that really, really groovy drum programming and bass line.
Yeah.
So that one just sounded like fire right from when it came in. And that was one of those ones where I was like, okay, cool. I don't want to change this much. I want to highlight things. So I did a couple EQ moves to accent the groove. And a couple things in the box to really highlight that groove, bring the drums out. I did some work on the subharmonic frequency for the bass to kind of make it sit. It in a weird way, it made it sit kind of back from the kick, so the kick still had punch, but that bass really had some fullness across the spectrum, and it actually ended up giving it some depth.
What does that mean exactly? Like, what did you do? Like, you just boosted like an exciter in the bass frequencies?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll do occasionally is there's Leapwing Root 1, which is a subharmonic enhancer. I'm not sure if I use that on this one, but basically what it does, and this is what I'll do sometimes with an EQ as well, is you kind of find the root of the song.
Right.
So whatever key it's in, you can figure that out, and then you just do multiples of, let's say, 36, 72, 144, and boosting those frequencies in balance really affects that entire low end, and you don't need much. It might be like a half dB on each of these, but it really enhances the low end. So
Smart.
Those are really, really very subtle moves. And then I did the mix came in and it was a tiny bit bright, but it wasn't anything I wanted to be changed on the mix end. It was something that I felt could really be handled really well with the specialty of the tools that I have here. And I just did some little shifting around of the high mids, a little bit around 1.5 to 2.5K, and a little bit in that kind of sizzle 5 to 8K range. And then a little bit in the air band, and just shifting things around just to make sure that everything had more of its own space, or like I could accentuate where those horns are. I think I may have brought out a little bit of low mids on the sides to really kind of bring the fullness of the horns out. Not so that it overpowered the vocal, but enough so that it felt nice and full.
So like you're doing all these like little micro EQ moves.
Yes.
Like just like a half a dB there.
Just
like
tiny things.
Maybe less.
Yeah, maybe sometimes less. Usually a half dB is pretty solidly where I'll sit at for things. And maybe a dB, but this song, as I said before, this song really, really didn't need much. This was all to me about highlighting what